Today's lesson is 1.1 and it's on points, lines, and planes. And what we're doing today is we're talking about the building blocks of geometry. Everything in the world is made up of things, and we need to be able to describe those things and describe how we put them together and how they interact with each other. And so we have to be able to relate that information to other people. And so we're going to be able to kind of describe our language, describe how we're going to use that instruction to do that. So the first term that we're going to be talking about is the word point. And the word point is actually just talking about a location. It is a spot on a map. It is a spot on the end of a pencil. It is not something that has dimension. It's not a big point or a small point. It is a location. We usually call it with a capital letter, so this would be point A, and even if I make this a bigger spot, it is still just a location. If you think about a GPS, it's a specific spot. If I make the dot bigger, it's not a bigger location. I just accidentally just drew the picture bigger, but I use it with a capital letter, and it just talks about a spot in space. The next term that we're going to talk about is a line. And a line is kind of unique in geometry because if I go to science class and I put this on the board, that would be considered a line. But in geometry class, this is not a line. A line in geometry is very unique. A line in geometry is something that goes on forever. It's infinitely long. It's an infinite number of points that extend in two different directions. So if I talk about having two endpoints, I want all the endpoints, all of the infinite many points going in both directions between those 2 points. And so we put an arrow on either side of a line in geometry, because a line goes on forever. So this is not the end of this line. It keeps on going forever. This arrow distinguishes that it keeps on going. And when we label it, we usually put more than one letter on it at times to label this. And so this would be line MN. And I put this little symbol above it here to show that that is actually a line. And to show that it goes on forever. I could also do it the other direction, and I could say it is line NM. But I could also put, these are capital letters, I could also put a cursive letter, like a cursive L back here, and I could say that this would be line L. So there's 3 different ways that I could distinguish or call this line or label this line. I could say line MN, I could say line NM, or I could say line L. Now I gotta be a little bit careful when I say this line MN, even though I only use 2 letters, there's 2 points that are labeled on this line, but you have to remember that there's an infinite number of points. Even just between these 2 labeled points, there's an infinite number of points. If I would move N to this spot right here, there's still an infinite number of points between those 2. So it's kind of that concept that's a little bit hard to grasp sometimes, but when you're trying to do that. Now, when I try to put more than one together, that's when we get to our next term, which is the term a plane. A plane is when I put more than one intersecting line together. And when I do that, I create a flat surface. And a plane is a flat surface that extends in all directions. So a flat surface would be like this whiteboard, would be a plane. But we don't want to just think about the end of it being here, at the top of the whiteboard and the bottom. It would go on forever into the sky. It would also go down into the earth, go down through the earth all the way in and go through the earth to the other side of the globe. And it would go all the way down into the sky down below and the stars below, so it keeps on going forever. But that would be a flat surface. And when we're trying to draw a flat surface or draw a plane, obviously we can't draw that it goes on forever. So we usually draw it as a four-sided shape. but we have to know that it extends in all directions. When we label it, we'll usually label it with 3 letters, or we'll use it with 1 bold letter in the corner. So if I would put the points on here of A, B, and C, I could say that this is plane ABC. Or if I would put, let's say, a bold letter Q here in the corner of this plane, I could also say that this is plane Q. It doesn't have a point next to it, so this could also be just labeled as plane Q. When I have the points next to them, then I use 3 of the letters, but when it has points on it, then I use 3 of the letters. When it doesn't have a point next to it, then I can just use just the 1 letter when I'm trying to do it. So when I'm trying to talk about points, a GPS would give you a location. That would be a point. When I'm thinking about maps, a road would be considered more of a line. When I'm talking about a plane would be like, the whole continent, a whole flat surface going all the way across. Now, obviously, on a map or on a globe, that doesn't always work because it doesn't extend continually. A plane continues all the way through. It doesn't stop at the end by the oceans. It keeps on going, but that'll kind of give you an idea of what it is. Now, when I put all of the points in the entire universe together, that puts us together with our next term, which is space. And space is the set of all points. And that's what we consider to be our 3D world. It's everything in 3 dimensions, every possible point going in every dimension. And, things will change when we're talking about a flat surface, which is a plane, or if we're talking in 3 dimensions. So we have to kind of be ready for that. Another term when we're talking about lines, if points are on the same line, then they would be considered collinear. You can kind of see that word co there and line. Co means with, so co-line, with line. So that means that they are on the same line. So if I look at these 2 points here, M and N, and if I put another point, let's say P, I could say M, N, and P here are collinear. They are on the same line. Now if I would put a J up here, M, N, and J are non-collinear. They are not on the same line. So that would be a term that we can look at for there. And the next term, very similar to that, would be the term coplanar. Again, with, and then you can see that word plane. So those would be on the same plane. So they're on the same flat surface. So if I would look at, the 3 corners of a ceiling, yes, they are all on the same plane. They're on the same flat surface of the ceiling. So I can look at those and try to determine what they are. Now, when we're looking at other terms, we can also look at things that have other uses or that have other directions that we can put them together. Besides things that go on forever, we also have some terms that do not go on forever. One of the things would be a line segment. A line segment has 2 endpoints, and then it again is all the points between those 2 endpoints. And again, there's an infinite number of points between those 2, but this would be a line segment. And this would be line segment CD, and again, I use the symbol of a line segment above it, because that would be different than if I would do the symbol CD with a line. That would mean that I'm also including, all the points on either side of it. But I don't want that. I just want the line segment CD, so then I just put that symbol there. So make sure you're very careful. I could also do it the other order. For line segments, it doesn't matter which order you use. C and D here would be considered the endpoints of those 2 terms. Now, we can also have the point where we can put those 2 together, and we could have one endpoint and one going on forever, and that's called a ray. So I'm starting with an endpoint, and then I'm just going to go infinitely more in one direction, and that would be called a ray. And so if I would label this, we'll call it X, and we'll go Y here. This would be ray XY. And be very careful, order here is important. With every ray, when you're labeling it, the first letter is always the endpoint, and the second letter is the direction it goes on forever. Even if I would draw this thing going the other direction like this, and I'll label this JK like this, I would still label this as ray JK. This is the way that I would label it, with the endpoint first and then the K. The first letter has to be the endpoint, no matter which direction it is going to face, as I'm trying to put those two together. And the next term that we want to talk about just a little bit is the term intersection. Now, you've heard that term before. We even use it in common language when we're talking about the intersection of 3rd Street and 4th Avenue. Where do those two streets meet? Where am I on both 3rd Street and 4th Avenue at the same time? Well, we're doing that with geometry terms as well. If I have this line here and I have this line here, when I'm talking about the intersection, I'm asking you, where am I on both of those lines at the same time? It would be this one spot right there. That's the intersection. Where am I on both of those at the same time? And that's where that's what we're going to be talking about when we're talking about intersections and where things cross and things like that. So that's the first basic introduction to all of our terms for this first section.